Welcome back to The Pulse, your weekly guide to global health. Now, some diseases like AIDS have real star power. Diarrhea isn't one of them. There aren't many famous actors or rock stars dying to be its goodwill ambassador. Now, that's a real shame because there are plenty of kids dying of diarrhea, almost 2 million every year. While diarrhea lacks star power, there is new hope against this deadly condition, thanks in part to new vaccines against rotavirus, one of the main causes. The Pulse went to Mexico to see these new tools in action.
The beaches of Tabasco, 400 miles from Mexico City and far from the tourist trail. These men fish in some of the richest waters in the world, the oil fields of the Mexican Gulf. Money from oil has been invested in health and education, and that investment prompted one of the world's biggest pharmaceutical companies to stake hundreds of millions of dollars on a project that could transform healthcare in all developing countries. It was 2004, and the drug company GlaxoSmithKline had developed the first in a new generation of vaccines to protect children against the most common cause of life-threatening diarrhea, highly contagious rotavirus. They wanted to give it to babies in the first few months of life when they're most at risk from the bug. But instead of aiming for a quick return on their investment in the high-profit markets of Europe and the US, they launched it here in Mexico. This is the story of how they did it.
This is the patient. She is Andrea.
Roger Glass, the rotavirus expert from the US Centers for Disease Control, and Dr. Arturo Montalvo at the Children's Hospital here in Villahermosa had seen too many cases like this.
So she came in with vomiting, diarrhea, dehydration, and she had other medical problems, and you've put her on IV, I can see you put her on IV rehydration now.
This baby did not have access to Glaxo's new vaccine called Rotarix. Quite simply, here in 2004, the mother could not afford it. And babies like Andrea, those who need it most, could only become beneficiaries if the vaccine were added to the list of immunizations given free to all children by the health service. Rotavirus infects virtually every baby in the world in the first few months of life. In developing countries, where access to rehydration is more difficult, the bug kills an estimated 500,000 children a year. Why so many get it, why it's so contagious, remains a mystery. In 2004, one of the major movers of the project underlined the importance of this new model.
We're here because Mexico is the first country to license one of the new generation of rotavirus vaccines and is currently considering its use in their national program for childhood immunization. This could have a major impact on improving the health of children here in Mexico. You know, most vaccines are first developed in the United States or Europe, tested there and used, and it takes 10 to 20 years before they ever get to a developing country. For this vaccine, the primary testing has been in these middle-income countries of Latin America. So we're very excited to see if we can actually have an impact on the prevention of mortality in these countries first.
At GlaxoSmithKline's vaccine plant in Belgium, they were beginning to produce the new vaccine. They'd spent about $500 million developing and testing Rotarix. So why did they take the risk of marketing it first in a developing country?
There has been a lot of complaint during the last 10, 20 years that the pharmaceutical industry was not doing enough for the developing country. So with Rotarix, we want to show that first there is an economical model because I'm working for shareholder, right? And two, that you can do good also for the world.
Jean-Stéphane's economic model depended on governments and international health agencies placing firm orders for hundreds of millions of doses of Rotarix in the future. His calculation was that with those big orders, GlaxoSmithKline could afford to sell the vaccine for a few dollars and still make a profit.
It will not be $1, it will be a few dollars, and the price will be function of volume and if we have multi-year contract. The only thing I can say is that the cost of development of a vaccine is expensive. So we spend for the development of that vaccine around $500 million. You need to have a certain return on investment, and we are looking for that too, and that's the kind of risk we take.
What made the change possible was the massive amount of money pumped into vaccines by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Combined with funds from the UN Children's Agency UNICEF, Jean-Stéphane calculated there was enough cash in the international pot to immunize children by the million. But how did the model work?
When we have obtained the Mexican registration, our first sales that we can do is in the private market. But our hope and our lobbying effort is that we hope that all the government in developing countries will purchase this vaccine, and also that the Gavi, so it means the Global Alliance for Vaccination and Immunization, will also have fund to purchase this vaccine. As you know, it's one of the 3 priorities of Gavi. So it means that we want to force, let's say, the world, the developed world, to help the developing country. And I'm thinking mainly Africa and the poorest country in Asia and Latin America.
Back in Mexico, the government was looking seriously at its response.
The government is clearly committed to thinking about rotavirus vaccines and considering their introduction. The issue then is one of policy and of one of cost. What will the vaccine cost, and do the cost and the benefits outweigh the risk of disease? And that's something for the politicians and the businessmen to consider.
But there was a problem. No one would confirm the figures, but it's thought that Glaxo wanted to charge the Mexican government about $24 for a course of treatment. Assuming 2 million children a year in the vaccine program, that would have been a bill of nearly $50 million a year. That was more than it cost to treat the children for diarrhea. Roger Glass returned to Mexico City to find out how discussions on the new vaccine had gone. Could the process of launching a new vaccine in a developing country really work? And could it therefore get more quickly to the children who needed it? Everyone was about to find out. And here's where the plan faced its next hurdle. Mexico, as a middle-income country, did not qualify for as much aid as the poorer nations of Latin America and Africa. Discussions on the price for supplying the national program went right to the top, and Roger went to see the head of the Preventive Health Department.
What's the cost of a case of rotavirus?
Most cases come in after 2-3 days of, with diarrhea, and that takes a longer hospitalization and treatment. The total amount of money invested into diarrhea, it's about $27 million a year.
But $27 million was far less than the suggested $50 million it might cost to vaccinate every baby. The minister said health advisors would have to decide whether the vaccine should be added to the list of free immunizations.
We don't want to wait 10 or 20 years for a vaccine that is introduced in a developed country to come into a developing country. I think we are in a level now in terms of a number of quality of research, quality of regulatory systems, quality of clinical trials that we can change that paradigm. And Mexico is changing the paradigm with this vaccine.
The coverage of the health surveillance system here is one reason Glaxo wanted to launch its new vaccine in Mexico, though it also helped them to beat their rivals to market. The drug company Merck had developed a similar vaccine, but they were seeking approval in the States first, and it takes longer to win a license there. The race to develop one began when the last vaccine was withdrawn because of an extremely rare but potentially fatal side effect. A vaccine against rotavirus became a declared priority for international health agencies. If Andrea had been vaccinated, she would almost certainly have been spared the worst effects of the disease. She would not be in hospital.
When you speak about disease like rotavirus, malaria, there is the obligation for the G8 or the developed world to purchase the vaccine for the poorest. And I think this is the model that we are trying to push through. And I think nobody then will complain that the pharmaceutical industry is not doing anything for the developing world.
Glaxo's declared aim was to change the way pharmaceutical companies treat developing nations. Instead of launching drugs in the developed world, they plan to market to poor countries first. The promise from international agencies to order hundreds of millions of doses for years to come completed the new model. Since 2004, Rotarix has been licensed in more than 100 countries, and it's been added to the national vaccine program in Mexico. Last year, about 90% of newborn babies here were vaccinated. Next year, it's expected to rise to nearly 100%. This is a Mexican experiment that's now been exported around the world.
That's all for this edition, but join us again next time on The Pulse.